Henry Louis Wallace was born in Barnwell, South Carolina, as it was described to be known for its rich history, including its role in the state's political landscape and its agricultural heritage. He was the son of a woman named Lottie Mae Wallace. Wallace grew up with his mother working long hours as a textile worker. Henry described his mother as being verbally abusive, criticizing him for the smallest mistakes. He attended Barnwell High School, where he was elected to the student council and was a cheerleader. Henry was very popular and known. After he graduated in 1983, Wallace became a disc jockey for a Barnwell radio station. Wallace went to several colleges before joining the U.S. Navy in 1985. That same year, he married his high school sweetheart, the former Moretta Brabham, in 1987. In 1988, Wallace was honorably discharged from the Navy, although his life seemed to be okay. When he went to the Navy, that's when he started to participate in criminal activities. During his time in the Navy, Wallace began using several drugs, including crack cocaine. In Washington, he was served warrants for several burglaries in and around the Seattle metro area. In January 1988, Wallace was arrested for breaking into a hardware store. That June, he pled guilty to second-degree burglary. A judge sentenced him to 2 years of supervised probation. He eventually would get out the Army and head back to his hometown in South Carolina. Henry was not in the best of headspace, going from being successful to now starting over. In March of 1990, Henry picked up his first victim, 18-year-old Tashanda Bethea. Henry was the last person with Tashanda before her body would be discovered weeks later in a creek. Henry was questioned, but was never charged with her murder. Henry met Tashanda sometime around 1989-1990. She was a high school senior in Barnwell, South Carolina. She was pretty and bright-eyed. Mr. Wallace had a crush on her and wanted to date her. The two had a family connection. Their mothers worked at the same factory and were friends. About 2 years later, Henry decided to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, about 2 hours away from Barnwell, South Carolina, where he would start his life over. He decided to work at fast food restaurants and became a manager at a Taco Bell on the east side of Charlotte, North Carolina. He would meet friends through his job and his sister as she stayed in Charlotte before he moved there. Henry was very charming and seemed to have an aura about him that attracted women as friends and lovers. Most women thought they could trust him. Little did they know, Henry had a bad side. In 1992, his victim in Charlotte, North Carolina, was a woman named in May. 1992, Wallace picked up 33-year-old Sharon Nance, a convicted drug dealer and prostitute. Wallace beat her to death when she asked for payment for her services, then dropped her body by railroad tracks. She was found a few days later. A month later, Henry was on a killing spree again. In June of 1992, Wallace raped and strangled Caroline Love, 20, at her apartment, then dumped her body in a wooded area. Love was a friend of Wallace's girlfriend. She was also his girlfriend's roommate and a college student. She had worked at a Bojangles at the time of the disappearance. After he killed her, Wallace, his girlfriend, and her sister filed a missing persons report at the police station. It would be almost 2 years in March of 1994 before her body was discovered in a wooded area in Charlotte. On February 19, 1993, Wallace strangled 20-year-old Shauna Hawk, a college student at her home. He staged Shauna crime scene as she drowned in the bathtub after first raping her. He later went to her funeral. Hawk had worked at Taco Bell, where Wallace was her supervisor. He went to the bank in Shauna car, where police would get a picture of the killer, but it wasn't clear. Only thing that stuck out was his earring. On June 22, 1993, a few months later, after killing Shauna Hawk, Henry Wallace raped and strangled his Taco Bell co-worker and manager, Audrey Spain, 24. Her body was found on June 25. On August 10, 1993, Wallace raped and strangled Valencia M. Jumper, a 21-year-old college student from Columbia, South Carolina, his sister's friend. He then set her body on fire to cover up the crime. A few days after her murder, Wallace and his sister went to Valencia's funeral, even sending her family condolences. Murders kept coming back to back. Police then knew it was something going on, but they never tied it together. The community was still in shock because the police never stated that it was a serial killer on the loose. They felt like it was due to race that they didn't connect the two. A month later, on September 14, 1993, Wallace went to the apartment of 20-year-old Michelle Stinson, a college student and friend of his from Taco Bell. He raped her and sometime later strangled and stabbed her in front of her oldest son. On February 4, 1994, Wallace was arrested for shoplifting, but police did not make a connection between him and the murders. On February 20, 1994, a day after Shauna's mother appealed to the public to find her daughter's murderer, Wallace raped and strangled Vanessa Little Mack, 25, in her West Charlotte apartment. He knew her through her sister, who was a co-worker of his at Taco Bell. On March 8, 1994, Wallace robbed, raped and strangled 24-year-old Betty Jean Borkham a day after her birthday. Borkham and Wallace's girlfriend were co-workers at Bojangles, where she was the assistant manager. After Wallace murdered her, he took a considerable number of valuables from the house, then left the apartment with her car. He pawned everything except the car, which he left at a local shopping center. Wallace returned to the same apartment complex on March 8, 1994, knowing that Burness Woods would be at work so he could murder Woods' girlfriend, Brandy June Henderson, an 18-year-old high school student, homemaker, and mother of Woods' child. Wallace raped Henderson while she held her baby and then strangled her. He also strangled her son, who survived. Police sent out an alert after 2 years stating the murders were tied together. The police increased their patrols in East Charlotte after 2 bodies of young black women were found at the Lake Apartments complex. Even so, Wallace sneaked in to rob and strangle Deborah Ann Slaughter, 35, who had been his girlfriend's co-worker. He raped, strangled, and stabbed her 38 times in the stomach and chest before taking money from the apartment for drugs. Slaughter's body was found on March 12, 1994. What made this as significant is that Deborah fought until she couldn't fight anymore. She knew Henry was the killer once he entered her home. Shauna Hawk Mom went on the news and called out Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department for the lack of attention to details when it came to all the murders. She felt like the public could see that these cases were tied together. How come they couldn't see it? Wallace was arrested on March 13, 1994. For 12 hours, he confessed to the murders of 10 Charlotte women. He then confessed to an 11th murder he committed before moving to Charlotte. Wallace described in detail the women's appearances, as well as how he raped, robbed, and killed the women. Charlotte's police chief, Dennis Nowicki, had said he was unaware of a killer until early March 1994, when 3 young black women were murdered within 4 days. The Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department apologized to Charlotte citizens for not spotting a link between the murders sooner. However, they said the murder cases varied enough to throw them off Wallace's trail. Until Wallace's murder pace picked up in the early weeks of March 1994, the deaths were sporadic and not entirely similar.